Well, thank you for all the questions that you've sent in via our Facebook page, and thank you to our sponsors, Mr. Fothergill Seeds and Cobra Garden. So we're going to crack on with them and get through as many as we can. We're going to start with hydrangeas because we've had a little flurry of hydrangea questions, and the first one is from Jill Mawson, and she wants to know how to move 2 precious hydrangeas, when and how to do it. Well, the time to do it, Jill, is when they're dormant, so we're looking any time really from late October, early November through until spring, when all the leaves have fallen off basically. That's when the plant's dormant, and the way we do it is you've got to dig them up with as much root as possible. They have a fibrous root system, so you can usually get a good root ball with a hydrangea. They are one shrub that moves very easily even if they're several years old. So lift it, put it into its new position straight away, improve the soil with compost, firm it in, and what does help, I find, is pruning them down by at least half. It means you'll get fewer flowers next year, but it really does help the plant to establish, and in the long run it will be better for it. Tina Lancaster would like to know when to prune a red hydrangea. Well, as long as it's this type of hydrangea, Tina, this is what we call hydrangea macrophylla. Some people call them hortensia. These are the ones that flower sort of August onwards on last year's growth, and it could be pink, red, white or blue. The pruning is the same, and what we tend to do is to leave these flowers on over winter as dead flowers. They look really attractive, get a bit of frost and cobwebs on them, and then in spring, just before things start to grow, you'll find it better in spring. But even on this one here, I can see that these buds just a little bit lower down are bigger and fatter, and by March they'll be really plump buds. They will be next year's flowering shoots. So what I'll do come March is snip them with my secateurs to there. These will grow out and produce the new stems with the flowers on for next year. If the plant's getting too big, what you can also do is to cut about 1/3 of the shoots lower down, and I did that last year, and we can see I've got some new growth coming at the base that will flower next year, and it just keeps them bushy and compact if you do that. So don't cut them all down in one go, otherwise you'll lose your flowers. It's a balance of older wood and new wood at the same time. And then Linda Fussell has also been in touch to say she's got a hydrangea in a pot. It's not flowered yet, it should be blue. I think if it's a young hydrangea, Linda, I wouldn't worry too much, and in a pot of course it needs loads of water and loads of feed, and in order to get the blue flowers it's got to be in ericaceous compost, so make sure you feed it with an ericaceous feed, and don't prune it of course. Leave it this year, let it make growth, and it's on that growth that you'll get your flowers next year. So that's it for the hydrangeas. But we've also had a question from Lisa Nichols about camellias. She's got a camellia that she's growing in a pot in the house, and it gets loads of buds on it, but she's only ever had one bud open. All the rest have fallen off. She's wondering whether it should actually be outside. Well, I think you've answered your own question really, Lisa. Yes, they are hardy, it needs to be outside. This is one I grow in a pot. I've just lifted up here to show you. They are totally hardy, they want to be outside, they'll grow in a pot, plenty of water, and this time of the year is really important for them. Sort of August through into September is when the flower buds form, and if we just look at the ends of the new growth it's made this year, we've got these lovely glossy green leaves here, but we've already got the buds forming. These fat buds at the end will be next year's flowers, so it's vital that at this time of the year we keep them well watered and we give them a liquid feed to help build up those flowers. And I suspect what's happening in your house, it's too warm, it's too dry an atmosphere, and that's making the flowers fall. So get it outside now, give it a bit of TLC, and hopefully you'll get more flowers next year. And we've also had a question from Steve O'Sullivan. This is about a lovely climbing plant called Trachelospermum jasminoides. It's an evergreen, it scrambles, and it has lovely scented cream coloured flowers. And he said it's finished flowering, he wants to know when to prune it. Well, it's not one that you prune that often really. It's one that you might give a trim to train it if you're growing it in an archway, over a doorway or a window, up an obelisk or something, but it doesn't need a lot of pruning, and it's always best to wait until spring because they aren't 100% hardy. If you live in a cold part of the country and you prune them in the autumn and we get lots of frost, it can damage them. So I would be tempting to wait until March. If you've got the odd branch in the way now, maybe give that a trim, but nothing too heavy, and then you can enjoy that foliage through the winter. So we'll have a wander around the garden and then answer some more questions. Well, I thought we'd pop into the veg plot and just look at a few plants in here. And the first question is from Lynn Street. And Lynn wants to know whether you should lift your Dahlia tubers in autumn or leave them in the ground. Well, I'm very much still a believer of you lift them when the frost has blackened them. But I'm in North Yorkshire and I know that if we get a bad winter, the frost will penetrate down and it will kill the tubers. You live in Devon, so you could probably get away with it if you leave them in because you don't always get as much frost. But the downside to leaving them in, I think, is if you get a wet winter, they can rot, or the slugs will get underground and take those new shoots. So my preferred method would be to lift them, but at the end of the day, it's your choice with that. The other one is Tony Collins. He's asked about Alstroemeria. He wants to know when to propagate them. Well, this is an Alstroemeria, really popular at the moment, make a great cut flower, last ages in water, lots of different colours. They've got a very fleshy, almost tuberous root, and the time to do it is to lift them in spring, take a bit of the root and some shoots away, do it when they're just starting to grow. I find that works really well. Pot them up, and this is one that I potted this spring just from a piece of root, and it's established and it's growing, and then if I knock that out just very quickly, I can see that that has already made a lovely root system. So I have a new plant there for free for the garden. And just a little tip, when you are using them for cut flower, don't cut them off, or if the flowers have gone over like this one here, I've got the seed pods on it, just put your finger on the ground so that you're supporting the root, and just they pull out like that, nice and cleanly away from the roots, and you don't get any dieback when you're doing that. While I'm down here by the courgettes, I've got a question here from Dawn Upton, and she's got courgettes. They're flowering well, but the fruits aren't growing despite watering. Well, I suspect it's probably nutritional really, unless you think there's something wrong with the roots. But if the plant looks healthy and it's growing, you probably need to water, but I'd give it a bit of feed as well, just a liquid feed, seaweed or any liquid feed you've got once a week. They are greedy plants, and it's a case of the more you water, the more you feed, the more they will flower and produce fruit. So I'm sure they will eventually, but then remember to pick them little and often, otherwise a courgette will very quickly turn into a marrow. So once they do go for it, I'm sure you'll get lots of fruits. Angie Vates has been in touch. The other day we were talking about apples in the orchard. She wants to know what rootstock I grow my Bramley apple on. Mine's on a MM106, which is now classed as a semi-vigorous. So it's not the big ones, it's sort of a midway, grows to about 15 feet ish. But if you want one slightly smaller, then I would go for an M26, which is a semi-dwarfing rootstock. They'll get to 10 to 12 feet. But it also depends on your soil. If you've got a very rich soil, they'll grow bigger than if they're on a poor sandy soil. So do a little bit of research. The RHS have got lots of information on their website if you want to have a look. Barbara Borsian has been in touch. She planted 5 raspberry canes earlier on in the year, but nothing has grown. They're just brown and no leaves. She wants to know whether to leave them for another year. I think, Barbara, if they haven't shown any shoots at all this season from planting, then I think it's fair to say that they're not going to grow, they're dead. So I think you've got to get rid of those and start again. So sorry to be the bearer of bad news there. Alma Jenkins bought some spring flowering bulbs last autumn, but she was unable to plant them all because she wasn't well. She put some in and they flowered beautifully, but she's still got some left in paper bags and wants to know if she can plant them this autumn. I suspect, Alma, I mean, you can check them. If they feel firm, then they might be okay, but I suspect if they're a year old, they will have completely dehydrated and won't grow. So I think, again, it's not good news there. It's probably better to get rid of those, buy some more and get them in. And then Pat Reed has also sent in a question. She's put some potatoes in pots to get them for Christmas. Well done you, Pat. She wants to know how much to water them. It's a case really of just keeping the compost moist. Don't give them too much. If you overwater them, they will rot off. So it's just moist. Test it with your fingers and away you go. So we'll pop into the polytunnel now because we've got a cucumber question. Sharon Flowers has sent a question in about her cucumbers. She's growing a variety called Marketmore, and she's saying the cucumbers are a bit hard and not very juicy. They just don't taste as they should. I think it's probably partly maybe the weather, Sharon, that's caused it. We've had changeable weather. They need plenty of water and plenty of feed to make them grow fast. But Marketmore is an old variety. It's what we call open pollinated. It's not one of the all-female ones. And I tend to grow the all-female ones, which are these. But this one here is an open and pollinated one. It's not market more, and they have two types of flowers. This one is a female flower, and you can see it's got the little embryo cucumber at the back there, and above it here is a male flower. And if I just pick that flower off, we can see there's no cucumber behind it, it's just a little stalk. So what you've got to do is take all of those male flowers off, leaving only the female, because if they pollinate, it can make them dry and taste a little bit bitter. So that's something that you need to go around on a regular basis, and then you'll get lovely, lovely, long, juicy, tasty cucumbers. The other question we've had while we're in the polytunnel is from Jeanette White, and she's growing tomatoes. She's growing plum tomatoes. She's slightly concerned, she said, because they are thick-skinned, really thick-skinned. Well, I think again that's partly varietal. Lots of the plum tomatoes are bred for the canning industry, and they have tough skin so they can travel around. They're for cooking basically, but again it can be the weather. If it's been very hot or they've been a bit dry, then the skin on any tomato will toughen. So again, lots of water, little and often is the answer. Never let them dry out, just to keep that skin nice and supple. And if I just wander backwards, we've got a question about figs. In fact, we've got two questions about figs. The first one is from Indira Bindra. She's got a fig tree that produces lots of figs. I'm presuming this is an outdoor one. She said, but they don't ripen, they fall off. Well, it might be that the fig, although they'll grow in hot, dry conditions, they do need water. So I find outside in hot weather you need to water them, and probably thin the figs. If it's got a lot of figs on early season, take some of them off so it gives the remaining ones chance to fill out, and a bit of feed around them as well. You've got to nurture them a little bit of summer pruning to take the excessive growth off will help them as well. And then the last one on figs, Shirley Chapman has got a fig in a pot. Last year she had dieback on it. She's cut that out and it's now growing well and making growth, but she wants to know how to get figs. Well, this is just a young fig that I've got here in this pot, as you can see, and I pinch it back to keep it nice and compact. I don't want it to be too big, and as you can see, this one is now producing figs. We've already had about half a dozen off it. In fact, there's one there that is just perfect to pick. I'm going to pick that. This is a little surprise for Mrs. Fish for being such a good camera operator. And if this is a brown turkey, and when they're ripe they're like this, that is what a brown turkey ripe fig will look like, but you want to know how to get them. In a pot, they need plenty of feed, they need watering to keep them moist, and don't do too much pruning from now on, because on those new shoots that you've got at the end of the season, you'll get little figs forming right in the tips. These may make it, they may not, but it's those little pea-sized ones that you want. They will overwinter, and that is your crop for next year. So be careful with the secateurs. And then just to finish off, Caroline Hall wants to know how to get rid of bamboo in a garden. Well, it's really difficult to get rid of. The best way is to dig it out, and it's got quite a tough root, so you've really got to get in there, dig it out, depending on the bamboo as well. Some are more vigorous than others, so you might get some regrowth, and as soon as you get any regrowth, you've just got to be there with your fork or your spade and dig it out. So it is quite a tough job. If you use a weed killer, it's entirely up to you, but as you get the new shoots, you could just dab them with a bit of weed killer. But if you're going to weed kill them, you might as well dig them out. But yeah, bit of hard work there, which is what it's been answering your question. So I'm going to reward myself now with half a fig, because this half is for Jill, and we'll be back answering more questions later on in the week. We'll see you then. Well, thank you for watching Pots and Trowels, and thank you for telling your friends about us. Sorry I didn't get a chance to answer all your questions today, but next time we'll finish them off, and we've got questions on a whole range of gardening subjects. So we'll see you then. Bye.